Good evening, Council President. Thank you for having us. I'm Aaron Schrager, the city engineer. Presenting with me tonight will be Rick Matias, the assistant city engineer, and we will be discussing the sidewalk installation and maintenance plan, which you have before you. We did email it around earlier. It's not very
I'm sorry, Aaron, can you just speak up? I can see someone in the audience saying they can't hear you, so if you could just speak.
Right, so we're here tonight to talk about the sidewalk installation and maintenance plan that we've prepared. It's before you. We did, email it around. It's just easier in paper copy, unfortunately, with all the maps. So we'll kind of go through a step-by-step of how we got to that plan, where we'll be going moving forward, and then have a little discussion and some questions. But we do know we got it to you, today or electronically. I think it was over the weekend. So, obviously we can come back once we're all able to kind of voice what we have to say about it. So with that, I will turn it over to Rick Matias. We'll kind of walk you through the first part, and then we'll team through this.
Thank you, Aaron. Members of council, mayor, thank you. So as Aaron mentioned, the sidewalk installation maintenance plan. I'm going to give you a brief history, some background, go through what we've done and where we're at, and then Aaron will take on some recommendations in the second half of the presentation. Let's see.
Not working.
No, sit enter. So it started in 1972, Chapter 18, Section 11. Council adopted the policy on the installation of sidewalks for safety of pedestrians. This allowed the city to install sidewalks in various locations where there was a need. Move forward to 2002, the City of Summit hired consultant Louis Berger Group to prepare the study entitled Local Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning Assistance Study. This was used in various capital improvement projects thereafter. In 2006, the city's master plan at that time made some various recommendations for sidewalk improvements and noted some issues throughout the city. 2007, based off of the recommendations in 2006, council revised Chapter 18, Section 11 to include a cost sharing. In the original version, residents bore the entire cost. In this revised ordinance, the cost was shared 50-50 with residents and council, or City of Summit. In 2010, council formed an ad hoc committee to issue guidelines for sidewalk installation and issued a map. Off of that as well, the Board of Ed, in conjunction with the police department, created a safe walking routes for each elementary school. That also went through the PTSO through each school. Moving along, the council also authorized the annual investment in pedestrian safety improvement program within the city's capital budget, and it committed the city to invest in pedestrian safety for pretty much every year thereafter. 2011, Chapter 18 was revised again, and this time was to allow for full funding by the city for sidewalks along the approved routes. 2014, the city adopted the Complete Streets policy, and this is based off of NJDOT guidelines. This allows us to apply for funding, and it makes sure that as designers and planners and engineers, we're looking at streets holistically, including sidewalks. That brings us to 2016, the master plan revision. I think we're all familiar with that. Goal number 3 was to improve connectivity between people and places. It looked for improved safety on streets and sidewalks for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. Specifically, Objective 3.01 called for the city to address pedestrian and cycling safety, focus on gaps throughout the sidewalk network, and promote the implementation of a full and complete sidewalk network. Now, full and complete sidewalk network, that does not mean sidewalk on every single street within the city. Just to be clear, that means the network that we have, make sure that people are getting to the places they need to go safely. So in 2017, engineering, we undertook the update to the sidewalk plan that was created in 2010 by the ad hoc committee. First thing we did is we devised an action plan. So we reviewed and update the existing sidewalk map. Go ahead. One more. And And we basically took the existing map that was created in 2010, various capital improvement projects had occurred since. We made sure that every bit of sidewalk was shown on this map within the city. Now, sidewalk specifically means concrete sidewalk. So if it was an asphalt path, a dirt path, a gravel path, we're not considering that sidewalk. We're looking at it as concrete. So the next step was to review all of our existing documents. There's a lot out there on sidewalk, not just in the city, but statewide. We have obviously our Chapter 18, which I've mentioned several times. The Complete Streets policy for the city, which I also mentioned, based off of the NJDOT Complete Streets policy and their Complete Streets Guide, which we use as a design guide. There's various documents also from Rutgers and from AASHTO, all on sidewalk. It's our job to obviously review these. Okay. All right, so the next step was to conduct a school travel mode survey. So our office, in conjunction with Trans Options, which is a nonprofit organization in New Jersey, we conducted a survey in every school for their mode of transportation to and from school. The survey was over a 3-day period in November of 2017, and it basically questioned and quizzed parents and students on whether they walked to school, biked to school, took cars, carpooled, mass transit, etc. So we found over that 3-day period that anywhere from 20 to 25% of students were walking to school citywide, which is a significant amount. There's more information on that in the actual plan as well that you guys have. So the next steps were to review potential locations for the installation of sidewalk, draft a report, and present recommendations, which is what we're doing now. So Aaron will come up and take up the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. So it's very complex, so we had a lot of data to look at. We had to collect a lot of data. We had to go through all the city streets, 80 total miles. And we did prepare the plan you have right in front of you, which is the sidewalk installation and maintenance plan. So what we include there are recommendations of how we move forward with the sidewalk network. And the first recommendation is to develop consistency with the city policies, ordinances, and guides that we have, because though they don't conflict everywhere, it would be beneficial to have them all at least referring to one agencies that still exist, to give adequate guidelines based on current guidelines, and just to make sure everything is gelling together, because there is some confusion about Section 18 and the complete streets, as well as other parts, and you have a master plan. So it's really to take a solid look at that and then make any changes that are necessary at this time. We have started that, but it needs to be done, completely. One thing is it refers to the PTO safety counselor, or something that doesn't exist anymore that we need to clarify and update the committees at this time too. Second recommendation is to evaluate the assessment practice that the city does. This does come up quite a bit in regards to when we do new sidewalk, who bears the cost of that. So it is something we need to take a real look at and decide moving forward. One, how it impacts everything now, how it would impact moving forward, as we do have the desire to increase the amount of sidewalks and place them in more locations. That is also underway, and there will be some memos and recommendations forthcoming on that. Next critical point is to evaluate the school walking routes. They were created about a decade ago. We've had some changes to crossing guard posts. We've had some new traffic signals installed, so they do need to be looked at. Each one with police and the Board of Ed, combined with DCS, to ensure those are the right routes, and to also just better promote them and to get them readily available. Some of them, we've created maps based on what we interpret them to be, but some of them are just handed out. Looks like old computer type font in the back of their handbook that I don't even know if they give the handbooks anymore, but in addition to just looking at the routes themselves is to promote them once they're reviewed, and that should really happen before the next school year. Continue to provide locations of new sidewalks, and we do have maps that we'll get to after these slides. And the last four really are just ones we've always kind of had in there, but that talks about sustainability, to always try to develop in a sustainable way, look at alternative type materials. But then again, that would also require alterations to the ordinance that permits alternate materials, pervious materials, things like that, and try to develop in a way we're not impacting trees, impacting the stormwater runoff. Street crossings, focus on that too, to make sure we're providing sidewalks at the appropriate street crossings, and the street crossings themselves are, well lit up, advanced warning, signage to give a sense of safety to the pedestrians. Sidewalk amenities is in there, and we go into it further in the plan. That's just to ensure at the appropriate place, you have benches, you have sidewalk cafes, you have trees, artwork should be included, and then prioritized. So if, we were to put sidewalk everywhere that we think it could be recommended, how do we pick which ones? Because we can't just do it all at once. It is a heavy lift. So moving on to some locations. What we have created here is, there is a legend for each one, but the route in the middle is what the Brayton School walking route would be. The green is the existing sidewalk network within the neighborhood of Brayton School, but then we show yellow where sidewalks should be proposed. And now we're proposing them based on, one, the policies and guidelines that are currently in effect within the city. So that could be whether it's within a school walking route of a certain distance, or if it's to complete a sidewalk gap or network. So in areas, we show it on both sides of the street, in most locations where we just haven't picked one, because we're not going to do an engineering study in every location until we determine that, yes, we actually want to do it. One, which is not on Brayton, but it would be like Pine Grove, for example. We would desire to put it on one side, not both, but on these maps, we show it on both just until that decision could be made. If you can go through the maps there. So you could see some of these. Franklin, they're all in there for the elementary school routes. Some questions have been raised about whether we should include the middle school and the high school with walking routes. While you could establish them, it's not common, but if you did, they essentially have sidewalk everywhere that would be within a half mile, quarter mile, 3/4 mile. So their network actually, since they're closer to the CRBD, does have a pretty good sidewalk network. The high school, some of the northern neighborhoods, Lafayette area, which will be shown on the map just as a gap, and part of Washington is one area, but pretty much those do have adequate routes as is. So now, a few locations that we propose that are not covered in any current policy or ordinance or guidelines are the four we have shown here, which is New Providence Avenue from Passaic to the transfer station. So a little bit would be on Kent Place section there, starting to pick up, with the free market and the transfer station itself, and just people with the walking trails. And then you do have a large vehicular volume of traffic. That would be a location that we would recommend that does not meet any of the criteria. And that's about 2,600 feet of sidewalk there. Hobart Avenue to service the Arboretum. So from Whitridge all the way up on one side up to the Arboretum. It's 2,300 feet of sidewalk. Woodland Avenue. This has come up before, and a lot of the original ad hoc committee was developed because of Woodland Avenue, because at the time we were paving it, and that would have been an ideal time to do work on there. Bedford to Canoe Brook, and that is a mile of sidewalk. And Glenside Avenue. So the Glenside network kind of stops well before Glenside Fields. It's a fast-moving road. That is an area we think that people would walk if they were afforded the opportunity to do so. And that's 4,300 feet of sidewalk. So now, walking forward, what we're looking to do is to have council review the plan, offer comments, and then essentially adopt the plan so we have our guide moving forward. Obviously, coordinate and update the school walking routes. We'll review the consistency between documents. We ask, and it's in the budget, to always continue the pedestrian safety account that has been established. Continue to address maintenance complaints, whether it's broken sidewalk or snow removal. That still falls within the property owner, but to ensure that we are following up with that and promoting it and educating our citizens on the value of having a sidewalk network. Approve capital projects with sidewalks, and really to improve and promote public awareness of the sidewalk network. So it's a critical time because for the last few years, a lot of our projects have either been very, less desirable sidewalk neighborhoods, but we're starting to get projects now that are really falling within roads that meet the current criteria, as well as ones that we feel should have sidewalks, Pine Grove being one, which is coming up later this year, and a few others. So with that, I would open it up for any questions or comments. And
Thank you, Aaron.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick. Very informative presentation, a lot of information. Just as a side note, I served on the 2010 Sidewalk Ad Hoc Committee. So this has taken us 9 years later and looking at a plan from there. A couple of things, I think, and I'm going to open up for folks. One of the things I think it would be helpful is to get this on the city's website,
Okay.
so that residents can see and appreciate what's going on, because I'm sure there are folks who have different views and opinions about these things. But what I saw here, as far as your next steps, it's kind of dependent upon us first as council making a decision. And I would think by the first meeting in April, that'll give us a month here for folks to be able to review this, give you their comments, and then we will go and vote on this one way or the other. Because I think, as you said, there are projects that are coming up that we're looking at funding through this capital budget, and it doesn't make sense to spend money and then subsequently say, oh, but we wanted to put a sidewalk there, and not do it. The last comment I'll make is, having served on the planning board at the time of the master plan and looking at the comments that we received from residents, sidewalks is a huge issue for many residents because of the fact that we have increased congestion in town. As we all know, we've taken many measures from this council through the police department to try to address the issue of safety of pedestrians. But one of the problems, of course, is that if pedestrians have to go walking, you go walking up to a certain distance, sidewalk ends, you're now suddenly on the street, you're facing cars. That is a huge, huge issue, and that affects seniors, that affects people with little kids. That is a big issue, and so we need to address this up front because this is something that people really want us to do. So those are all my comments. Open it up.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you so much for doing this. And I want to just emphasize Council President's notes. We hear from residents all the time. This is a big priority. When we've gone door to door, talking to residents, that this having sidewalks in their community is definitely a priority. And then broader than that, looking to the future and how to position Summit. Some of us attended the American Planning Conference a few weeks ago, and that was one of the key takeaways, is that these, walkable cities is really the way that is what people are really looking for, and moving to communities and, keeping the community vibrant, healthy, all those things. That walkability is one of the really key components. So this is definitely a priority for us. In looking at the proposed plan of the sidewalks that we need to do, have you figured out a way to prioritize certain sidewalks? Are we just going to prioritize the ones that are doing road, when we're doing road projects anyway? Or are there definitely areas where you feel like these are key sidewalks along school routes, or do you have a priority list of the sidewalks that need to be done?
Well, the first priority is always when we have a capital project there,
Right.
because it's the easiest, and then it's also the cheapest, because then it's an add-on instead of just a standalone sidewalk project. So that would be the priority. Then we're working, and we will develop non-capital projects, sidewalk projects that we could do. The 4 we had listed there would all fall under that, because Hobart was previously done, Woodland was previously done. Actually, New Providence is coming up in the budget, but Glenside is, when you get into county and state roads, that's going to fall on the city, so that would be us. So, but yes, we will prioritize based on the maps that are there. So.
Great, thank you, Aaron.
Anybody else? Matt?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mr. Schrager, for this excellent and very thorough presentation. My question, I have a couple questions. Well, the prioritization, Beth, he's got a whole list also buried in there that shows you the sort of order of priorities. Maybe you don't know this answer, but if we were to do every recommendation that you have in there and put in all the sidewalks that you showed in yellow on the maps, what would be the total cost of all of those?
The short answer is a lot of money, and we don't have it, but we could.
Or is there an amount per mile that it usually costs?
We have a $35 per foot is a safe estimate. Where it could get challenged, it could be cheaper if you have someone without trees and a just large swath of land.
Yeah.
Where it could be challenging is one that has been floated around is Morris Avenue along the hospital there, because there is going to be a sizable wall, which would be far more than 30. So the wall itself will probably be $50 a foot, let alone the sidewalk. So, but 35 is a safe estimate. So could we get the footage provided and give you a total? Yeah, absolutely. So.
Right, but 35 a foot is good enough. And in terms of integrating with bike lanes, with building bike lanes or putting in, does it make sense to do that at the same time as well, or is there no connection between the two?
There's no real connection, but if it's a capital project and it's part of the complete streets, we would look to do bike lanes. I mean, in general, our streets aren't wide enough to have true bike lanes, but it would only come in if you have the ability to put a much wider shared use path, which we really don't have the right of way to do that in probably any locations. There might be a few, but that's just something we'd look at as complete streets. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Marjorie.
Aaron, thank you so much for doing this, and Rick as well. I know you guys have worked very hard on this. It's been an ongoing conversation in our committees for quite a while, so it's really nice to see something being presented. And I'd like to echo what Council Member Little said about sort of the importance of sidewalks as far as healthy lifestyles, building community, and also even, with the schools, the idea of our schools is that they're supposed to be walkable, and I think that's something we owe our community, is to make those schools truly walkable and safe to walk to school. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, thanks, Rick. Thanks, Aaron, for this. This is great. I love maps, so it's fun to look through everything. Just for the people watching at home, though, so the ordinances have changed over the years on who's responsible or what cost was bared by the citizen versus the city. So my understanding is that if it's deemed a walking route now, the city and the city picks up the tab for the sidewalk installation. Is that correct?
That's the current Section 1811. Yes.
Perfect. So for the sections that fall outside of that, just so for people know. So for instance, the Glenside one or the Hobart Avenue to the Arboretum, how does that get apportioned between the citizens and the town if there is an apportionment?
So that would be the responsibility of the property owner. So unless, and this is where we want to look at the, every ordinance, there is some wordage in there. I don't have it exactly, unfortunately, but if it's deemed a safety concern by the engineers or city staff in concurrence with the Common Council, we do have the ability to pick up the cost. So that's where it's just it leaves a little bit of grayness to it. So.
But and that's decided at what level? Does the council have to determine that on an individual basis?
Right.
Okay.
So, now there has been no instances of that since we have since 1811 was revised. So.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And then you mentioned, I know what's neat about Summit is that there are you drive around or you walk around. Some people have the slate sidewalks. Some people have concrete sidewalks. Some people have gravel sidewalks. And I know part of the study is to try and figure out sort of what constitutes a sidewalk. What is the sort of the methodology you're going to use to determine that? Is there an insurance issue around that, like say for gravel versus slate versus concrete? I mean, do we have a preferred sidewalk I mean, the city, I would assume we always usually install concrete, right?
It's concrete, and that's what's required by ordinance. We have used asphalt in a few locations. That's better with tree roots. There is a few instances of rubber sidewalk we had installed on, I think it's on Hartley, or on Hartley Road. That was there just kind of as a test. There is slate. We have removed slate, and we also in High Street did have council approve for slate to be maintained there in that neighborhood. It was a little more historic, and it was more uniform that the whole neighborhood had it. But the issue with slate is it can get more slippery. It's more expensive to maintain if you do crack it. Some of these old pieces are 2 inches thick that you have to get quarried in from somewhere not close. And really, it's to ensure we have an accessible path for residents in ADA compliance. So you really want to get smooth surface and keep your cracks to a minimum, which you can achieve with slate. It's just that tends to shift a lot more. So the problem with slate is it's then up to the homeowner to maintain it. So.
Right, and I just know on Hobart Avenue, for instance, there already is sidewalks in portions of Hobart, but some of it's gravel.
Right.
And I guess are we going to be okay with that? I don't know what the answer is, but I would assume some of the residents would be very clear that they'd love to maintain the gravel aspect because they like it. I think it looks nice, but I don't know if it's a safety issue or an insurance issue or how that all works.
Yeah, we will look at everything, but a true sidewalk would be a more solid surface. And I know the property you're talking about, and they happen to maintain it, exceptionally. And it is, it's very easy to travel that, but it's just you're getting into a wheelchair and just, for people who might have a little less mobility on a harder surface. So that's why that property is not shown in a few others that have gravel as actually being an existing sidewalk property.
Right.
Just because with current ordinance, it's not classified. And I don't think we'd be inclined to classify it. But that's something we would look at. Because the benefit is it is, obviously pervious and maybe cheaper. Well, it's more to maintain, but cheaper to probably construct. So.
Right. And then one last comment. Sure. Just on the sidewalk plan, Councilwoman Fox mentioned a great comment about achieving connectivity throughout our community and as well as, adding bike paths and stuff. I know the section of the park line right now, I think the Denman Place people use that almost as a walking route. But as a plug for something, that idea that's a connector, and I know there are steps to make for that. But if that does go through, I would hope that we would be able to maybe incorporate that into this because it unlike most parks, at least that's a connecting park. And I know one of the visions of it is it's a way that you can get people safely from East Summit into the downtown. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Thank you, Mike. Go, Steve.
Yeah, one real quick one. There's a couple intersections that have you talked about the ADA connector.
Right.
However, there's a couple that it connects to grass, and the neighbors are concerned that, oh my gosh, they're not really excited about having a lawn or ruin, as they said, by a sidewalk. What is the purpose of a ADA ramp going into a grass strip?
That's required through, that's ADA requirements actually, is to afford them. So you'll see it indefinitely when we have NJDOT local funding. They always require it. And other times we have required it. And it's just if you're coming from a sidewalk and that might just be your landing, you have to afford wheelchair-bound pedestrians somewhere to actually get off the road, even though there's no sidewalk going either way. It's how the law works. It does at times look unusual, but that is the intent of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There's
Yeah,
some places
just-
that you just have just...
It goes into grass.
Yeah,
Grass.
exactly, and then you have grass. But I think these are all interesting issues, a lot of them, that have been brought up, but I think what you're hearing is that, we'll have to work through some of these things. Obviously, as I said, let's try for April 5th or whatever the first meeting is in April, and we will, move forward with this, so this way the other steps that need to be done to get this ball going are done. Let me open it up to the public in case there are folks in the audience who have any questions, comments, suggestions. Okay, seeing none. Okay, so we'll hopefully see you guys back in April to discuss this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.